In the last few years, since theaters reopened their doors, the Walt Disney Company has lost some $2 billion of capital investment in marketing thanks to lower box office returns, largely due to bad products. And then, of course, there's the issue of theme parks that seem to be plateauing, at least here in the U.S., because Disney announced that they were going to invest some $60 billion of capital over the next 10 years, but almost all of that is going to be spent overseas. Meanwhile, of course, Universal Studios is ramping up for a major expansion in Orlando, a hotbed of tourist activity and theme park goers with its epic universe. And then there's the more broad-scoped secular issue of people cutting the cord. ESPN and linear broadcast revenue like cable channels, well, that advertising is going down. That's been something of tremendous concern because Disney still seems, as of yet, to have no viable roadmap towards profitability for its direct-to-consumer products like Disney+.
That's not good.
This has all led to a cash crunch over the last several years for the Walt Disney Company. We've talked about it many times, especially during our live coverage of Disney earnings calls. And right at the moment when Disney would want to have as much in cash reserves on hand as possible, they seem to have lost another $200 million.
Okay, that's not good.
Online. Here we have ZEE TV is said to have missed a $200 million IPL Cricket fee to Disney. So you, of course, you spent many a years as a CPA, as an auditor, financial guru. You're gonna be able to dive right into this. So let me give the audience a bit of a background here. Back in the summer of 22, while Bob Chapek was still CEO of Disney, he made what at the time seemed like a very wise decision, trying to effectively sublease some of the IPL, the India Premier Cricket League, that Disney had streaming rights to a local Indian broadcaster, ZEE TV. ZEE TV is currently in discussions with Sony to do a merger with their India operations. That is having some issues right now, and that's leading to this where it looks like ZEE has just recently missed a big payment that was due to the Walt Disney Company of $200 million at a time that Disney is very cash crunched. So before we get into the article, let me ask you this. We've talked about this on live streams with Disney before for their earnings calls. You have been tracking this. Can you give the audience kind of a sense of where Disney's cash reserves, cash on hand, cash flows positions are today versus maybe just a few years ago?
Well, sure. If you look at the annual financials and certainly the quarterly earnings reports and all of the documents that are released as part of the SEC regulatory filings, you will see that if we were to compare Disney, say, I don't know, let's go back 10, 12 years ago versus, say, the last 4 years, if you want, or even pre-COVID to now, what you're going to see is that the amount of free-flowing available cash flow, it's called FCF, free-flowing cash flow, is much tighter than it's ever been.
And by tighter, you mean smaller.
Smaller, yes, sir.
Yes.
Yeah. Because what's happened is that, when you look at the balance sheet, you look at total liability, or you look at current liabilities against current assets, and then within current assets, you look to see how much cash do they have on hand. And as we've covered on your channel on multiple Sundays, you've got a company here that's indebted well in excess of $100 billion. And on any given quarter of the last 6 quarters, they've had on average anywhere between 9.7 and about $14 billion worth of cash. So that, that's no more, that's analogous to, you owe $100 and you've got $10. It's that kind of thing. The problem is that that's their total debt. Their current liabilities have almost exactly what their current cash flow is. And so they've all, on any given quarter, they've owed this, say, $10 or $20 billion. They've had about about $10 or $12 billion on hand, but they still owe in addition to the current liabilities, this long-term debt from Fox, from all the deals they've done that have exceeded $100 billion. So $200 million, if you just, from a basic cash standpoint, one of the things that we calculate on this channel a couple of times on a couple Sundays on your live show, don't miss the Valiant Renegade live show, by the way, shameless plug, is that if we look at their free-flowing cash and we just divide it in by the number of weeks that are in an average quarter, I mean, it's very simple math. You take, say, you take the number of billions of dollars worth of cash, you divide it into the number of weeks. A $200 million missed payment, that's like not bringing any cash in at all that day or for a couple of days. I mean, it's significant. $200 million is a significant, and this is something I think they're going to have to disclose in at least a footnote in their financial filings. We've got an earnings call coming up, Valiant. I think that's what, February 7th?
Yeah.
This is not, I don't know how Wall Street's going to react to this, but essentially someone just stiffed Disney for $200 million, literally stiffed for $200 million. And, reading this article, I skimmed it. I haven't researched it in depth, but usually when someone misses a payment like this, if they don't have all 200 million, they'll usually say, hey, we're sending you 100 million now, and we'll send you another 50 million on this day, another 50 million. If they miss the entire 200 million, are we talking about a bad debt potentially? Maybe.
Yeah. And let's look at this real quick. Let's go back to this article. So this is partly initially reported by Bloomberg magazine. So let's kind of zoom in here. Zee Entertainment Enterprises has missed a deadline to pay $200 million to Walt Disney Company's India unit for TV rights of cricket matches, according to people familiar with the matter, as the firm tries to preserve cash ahead of a likely collapse of its mega merger with Sony Group Corp. The Mumbai-based media firm ZEE TV didn't pay the installment due early January, citing a cash crunch. Sounds familiar. It seems like Disney's having the same problem, although, albeit to a different scale. The People said, asking not to be named as the information is not public. Disney has sought an explanation from Zee on why the payment was skipped. They said adding the tranche was part of the over $1.4 billion that Zee agreed to pay for the license agreement signed in August of 2022, again, when Bob Chapek was CEO. Defaulting on the payment to Disney poses fresh headaches for Zee, including possible legal wrangles, even if it deals with the fallout of a collapsing merger with the Sony Group. Zee hasn't furnished bank guarantees for the sum that was to be paid for the contract, according to one person familiar with the situation. Spokesperson for Zee and Disney did not immediately respond. Now, they go on to talk about some other aspects of this. And let me pull this up just to show people kind of what we're talking about here. This from Reuters. This from just yesterday as we were recording this. Zee says it committed to the $10 billion. It says that it's still committed to the $10 billion merger with Sony India. Although if you read through this, Sony seems disinclined to acquiesce to their proposal as of right now. Zee said Tuesday it was still committed to the merger, a $10 billion deal. Zee said reports of the deal falling through were, quote, baseless and factually incorrect, and that it continues to work towards closing the deal. Sony, however, according to sources, plans to file a termination notice before the January 20th deadline. That's roughly 10 days from now, to close the deal over an impasse on whether Zee CEO, who is facing a regulatory probe, will lead the merged company. That's also according to Bloomberg. Zee shares closed down. Analysts say the deal is crucial to the company's survival among the looming merger, and this is the other part of the interesting aspects of this. The merger of the looming local heavyweight Reliance Industries and Walt Disney. Now, we've talked about that before. Disney and Reliance are working on their own multi-billion-dollar deal, effectively for Disney to just jettison what is now referred to as Disney Hotstar, which has been losing millions and millions of subscribers quarter over quarter for Disney, which is why Disney has now deliberately broken that part out on some of their reporting, how they recast their financials, because that is what's been sinking and tanking the overall subscription numbers for Disney Plus, 95 to 99% of it at least. So that's on the table. Disney needs this is going to heighten the necessity for Disney to get that deal closed. Now, this is where it gets interesting, Mike, and here's where I might just blow your mind. If you can chime in on this as an expert opinion as to whether you think that ZEE TV is going to ever have the capability to pay this $200 million. And remember, this is one payment. There's still other payments as part of this $1.4 billion deal.
When you read that term tranche means payment for those at home. When they use the word tranche is a finance term, but it means payment.
Yes. So, Mike, why don't you read this paragraph for us, and then I'm going to translate.
Zee, which has been struggling with declining advertisement revenue, saw its cash reserves fall to 2.48 billion rupees in 6 months ended September 30th from 5.8 billion rupees in the year ago period. So that basically means it was cut in half. Its net profit slumped 68% in the same period. Wow.
So let's translate this. They owe $200 million to Disney. They are saying that their cash reserves are at 2.48 billion rupees. Well, if we use an exchange calculator, let's see how much 2.48 billion rupees is in US dollars. Mike, what is that figure right there?
Wow. 29.870
million
US dollars million.
Yeah, $29 million.
$30 million. Holy crap.
They basically have cash reserves of only 15% for the whole company of what they owe Disney. And that's leaving them, if they were to pay Disney even the 15% they have, they basically are bankrupt. They have nothing.
So not only what we're realizing here is not only are they getting the 200 million Valiant, but any another tranche or payment, as we've described, any other tranches or payments are not going to happen. Mm-hmm. So that means that the loss for Disney isn't merely this one missed payment of 200 million. It is however many payments that they're scheduled to make from now until that $1.4 billion was supposed to have been paid. Yeah. That means this is going to be a massive hit on the Disney cash flow. Massive.
Yeah. So we could be seeing some serious impact as this year progresses. I
stand corrected. 200 million might be a footnote, but a default of the agreement with something as big as India, that better be disclosed. And I sure hope there's a question from Wall Street on the earnings call that's coming up on February 17th, because let me tell you this. There was something that you read earlier, Valiant, which was really important, which said there was a little phrase about being no bank guarantees. A lot of times what happens when these deals get signed, like when Disney signed this deal with these guys, with ZEE TV, and they agreed to this payment schedule, what'll happen is that they'll go and get letters of credit or other financial instruments that are designed to guarantee that the payment schedule is met and achieved, so that way tranche payments aren't missed. It's similar to, like, for example, overdraft protection. It's a very simplistic way of, but it's kind of like that. The way it works is that the entity commits to say, hey, I'm going to pay you this 200 million, this 200 million, this 200 million, but you get a bank guarantee or some kind of financial instrument, such as a letter of guarantee or line of credit or something like that. So that way, if for whatever reason that 200 million isn't available, at least in this case, Disney would have been assured that those payments would have been made, because a douche bank or another financial house, another money house, another financial a commercial lender would have made sure that deal, the financing was secured, even if cash wasn't. It's almost like, say, hey, you got to buy groceries, but you got a credit card in case you don't have enough money on your debit card. Your debit card, you need to go buy $2,000 worth of groceries, but you only got $100 on your debit card, but you got a credit card for $5,000, so you can go make that payment at the grocery store. In this case, Zee not only doesn't have any cash on hand for the 200 million, but all of the 200 million that are left are money that's never going to show up in Disney's bank account.
It doesn't seem like it, and it seems like ZEE TV was very much counting on closing this merger deal with Sony by now, or at least having it in principle. But it looks like Sony is pulling out, and the polish is coming off the turd for Z, and Disney may be well left out in the cold. What's interesting to me, we just had the end of the year, the close of the fiscal quarter for Disney, the first fiscal quarter of 2024 for Disney, December 31st of 23. That's what we're going to be listening to February 7th. I would imagine on December 31st, being the fact that presumably this was well within side of the net 30 in terms of receivables, this $200 million was probably sitting on the accounts receivable tab on Disney's balance sheet. And as you mentioned, there's probably going to have to be an asterisk by the time we get to February 7th on that for Disney.
Absolutely.
Well, it's another 200 gone.
Here's the other thing, too, is that if you're Sony and you know what, look, we're discussing this on your channel now. If you're Sony and you know their cash position and you know they're defaulting and you see this, why would you close this deal? It makes no sense.
Right. Just let them fail and then pick them up
Let
for
them
pennies
fail
on the
and then
dollar.
pick up the scraps for pennies on the dollar and let Disney, pound sand.
Yep.
Wow.
That seems like...
Dang it, Bob. How did we not know this was happening, Bob? Dang it, Bob.
It's always a fun one with the Bob Iger Company, or as I've referred to in a previous video, Bob Iger Incorporated. We might just have some merchandise coming out for you guys on that one soon. So, Mike, final thoughts on this one before we close.
Disney as a company needs to not worry about politics and worry about its money and worry about all these deals that it's involved in, because this is not a company that can withstand this kind of a hit. I mean, I don't know how much I'm going to do a little research on mine. I don't know how much of this has been paid, but if they're going to lose 200 million to 800 million, that's all the revenue that they make from the parks on any given quarter at any given time. I mean, you're talking like, 200, 800 million. Good God. How many months worth of revenue is that? And net profit, I mean, in terms of cash flow, not growth. I'm talking about net profit.
Mm-hmm. And even if this was just the final payment on the deal, I mean, I don't think
it was the final payment.
I don't think it was either. Again, this deal was just struck back in August of 22. So we're talking about a deal that is a year and 4 months old.
Yeah, usually what happens when these deals are done, and I don't know if it was this deal, but usually the payments are quarterly. That's generally how they're structured. They're not monthly, they're quarterly, usually. Mm-hmm. But, 200 million. Well,
yeah. And maybe more to come. Make sure you're subscribed to Valiant Renegade and join us every Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern for the live show.